Hi, welcome to the Gamesplainer. I'm Jeff the Gamesplainer, and today I'm gamesplaining Firenze. Firenze is a game that came out from Quind Games in 2010, which is 9 years old at the moment, and it's not really optimal to be doing stuff that's that old, but you know what, it's still on the shelves, it's still around, it's still a game that's worthwhile having a look at. I haven't actually seen a copy of it for a while, not that I've been looking, but it's kind of appeared and suddenly it's there on the shelf, a few different copies of it. So I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go and give it a Gamesplain and see how we end up. The game plays for 2 to 4 players. As I say, it's from Quind Games, which, to be 100% honest with you, when I first came across them, it was probably around about this time last year, I wasn't a huge fan, and I think that might be because of the game that I played. So I've since played more of their games, so Firenze and Carson City, to just name two, and I've actually really enjoyed both of those games. So I fear that it was just the one game that kind of put me off them a little bit. I'm coming around to them. And the reason that one game put me off was it felt like it was a little bit too much of a game. Now that might have been just where my headspace was at the time that I actually did the videos for it. But fortunately, I didn't purchase that one. I was using someone else's copy for the videos, but I didn't really grasp the game totally. I think that's where the issue was, and maybe a few too many rules for what was actually happening in the game to be able to follow what was going on. But let's push that aside. Firenze, it plays 2 to 4 players, and it's a relatively straightforward game. You have a list of cards, or a pile of cards that are down the bottom. Each of those cards has 4 tiles on it. The idea of the game is that you take a card and you get all the tiles that are on there. Then from those tiles on there, you can start building buildings. And each building you build has to be of the same color. So that straight away makes you go towards various different cards because of the color of tiles that are on there. If you want one of the cards that's further up, it's going to cost you some tiles, which we understand that. We've seen that in numerous games in recent years. You have a hand limit, so you need to kind of use the cards before you take enough cards that are going to limit your hand. So having some of the cards that have to stay in your hand, some cards have to go on the table and stay on the table. You find yourself getting into that space of, oh, I've got these couple of things, and I've got this one card that can do something, I'm going to have to use it if I want to take more cards in. That is a really good place to be at. There are some negative cards as well, some positive cards, so you end up with some cards that are going to give you some negative points at the end of the game, just sitting and gaining tiles and gaining tiles and gaining tiles because no one wants to take them, until there's a heap of tiles on there, and then someone will eventually take it and go, you know what, I actually need all those tiles because I can get a heap of points by using them. Now the other thing to bear in mind is when you're building these buildings that all have to be the same color, you must build each turn. So if you have a yellow building going and a white building, you have to put a yellow and a white tile on them. Otherwise you will lose most of those tiles and lose the building that you've been kind of working towards. Now on the board itself, you get certain points for the number of tiles high that a building actually is. So if someone else is going for the same spot as you are and they get it before you, you may find that you actually have too many tiles in a building and you have to discard it unless you've got a card that will enable you to take a higher or lower level of the building. There's a heck of a lot going on in terms of the thought process, even though the actual playing of it is fairly straightforward. Now, my one gripe on this game, and I don't know if it is a gripe per se, but it's this. This is all the cards that you are taking from the bottom of the board that have those tiles on them that I was talking about before. The problem with this is that it's really hard to remember what each card does. So I found that I have to go back to this sheet so many times during a game to help jog my memory. Even of cards that I've seen and had come through a few times, I've still had to go back to that sheet. I've had to pass that sheet to other players so they can kind of get their heads around it. Yes, there's icons on the bottom of those cards. Yes, those icons mean stuff, but they don't necessarily mean what you think they mean. So always going back and double checking on this sheet. I mean, I'm glad that it's as a separate sheet, not in the rule book. Don't get me wrong. That's a really good thing. But having to find it and then read it, it just takes a little bit of too much time to kind of get around in order to play the game, in order to take your turn. So we found that a lot of people were kind of hesitating or stopping on their turn, kind of like, oh, what's that card do again? Let's look it up. Oh, what's that card do again? Let's look it up. And yeah, that just slows the game down fairly dramatically, where it doesn't really need to. I wonder if there's a different iconography that can be used. Like, don't misunderstand me, the icons they've used are valid, but they don't necessarily mean what we expect them to mean all the time, or it's very easy to misread what an icon does, so it's a lot easier to go to the sheet. So I don't know if that's just a modern gaming, there's almost a language coming through in icons, and it's worth grasping onto that this icon means this all the time. That idea is probably actually a really good idea to grab onto. I don't know the legalities on it, but some games struggle with icons because there's a heap of them and they don't necessarily make 100% sense. Others, the icons make sense, so you just go, oh yeah, that's what this means. It may be the number of different mechanisms that are within those icons that changes how we understand them and how we read them and how we remember them. But it's one thing to kind of just think about. If you're purchasing a game, playing a game, or designing a game especially, the number of icons and what those icons mean is really particular, and how quickly can someone remember that icon if they've played it a few times, which I've played Firenze a number of times, and I still find that I'm going back to this sheet to kind of go, oh, what's that mean again? I can't remember. Other than that, there's a heap of points to the game. It felt, in the last game I played a 4-player game, there was one player who was getting all of the extra levels. So there's 4 kind of extra point cards that have to be taken in order. And so it's building up the building to that level. And there was one player who was just getting heaps of them and heaps of them. He only won by like 4 points. I didn't get any of them, and he still only won by 4 points. And that wasn't because he was playing badly, but because there's other stuff that you can do that will gain the points, that will push you forward. And looking for them and knowing where those spots are is actually really important within this game. I've played this game against my daughter, who beat me by half a board. So I'm not saying that you'll always come through with this result of really tight, but there's a chance that if you're not getting those extra levels, you may still be able to get some fairly good points. Look, I'll leave it there. Go ahead and watch my Gamesplained and Gamesplay to get a feel for how the game plays, to look at it and go, oh yeah, I really like the idea of that game. Or, no, that's not a game that's in my repertoire that would suit me properly. So go on, watch Gameplay Gamesplanation. If you have any questions or thoughts or suggestions, please write them below. If you have any games that you would like to be Gamesplained, please shoot me an email at thegamesplainer@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at thegamesplainer to keep up to date with the games that I'm playing. Subscribe to my videos to keep up to date with the games that I'm gamesplaining. And until next time, enjoy gaming.